Hello, you are listening to the Out of School Time podcast, where we discuss the value of out of school time programs in the lives of children, youth, families, and the communities they serve. In each episode, we will interview experts in the out of school time field and discuss the various elements of quality out of school time programs. Now, here is your host, Edward Franklin.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Peck, for joining me today on the Out of School Time podcast. Really appreciate your time. And I'm looking forward to talking with you and hearing all about the Partnership for Children and Youth and all the wonderful things that you got going down there in California and specifically the Bay Area, correct?
That's correct. That's where we are based.
Okay. Well, the first question, and maybe a baby question, but what are the Bay Area communities?
Well, the most familiar one, of course, is San Francisco, but I live closer to Oakland, but there's a big kind of 9-county area here with millions and millions of people sort of surrounding the San Francisco Bay. So the Bay Area is considered, all the communities that touch San Francisco Bay.
Okay. Cool. All right. So we had an opportunity to meet each other. I think it was, what is this? This is 21. Last year in 20, when I was a fellow for the White Riley Peterson Policy Fellow. And you were a special guest and telling us all about the wonderful things that you've accomplished with the Partnership for Children and Youth. So if you wouldn't mind, can you share a little about what is the Partnership for Children and Youth and your role there?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm the founder of the organization. We were founded 20 years ago, and I've been here that whole time. And basically, our mission is to make sure that young people living in the most underserved communities across the state of California have access to all the learning supports and learning opportunities that we know through a whole lot of research and also experience that are really important for their success in school and beyond school. And our main work has been in the after school and summer program arena, because we know how consequential those out of school time hours are to kids' learning and success. But access to those opportunities has been inequitable for a very, very long time. And so in that work, as an intermediary that works statewide, we are both an advocacy organization. So we do a lot of advocating around resources and policy in our state capital, but we're also a capacity building organization. So we provide training and technical assistance and other kinds of support to communities that are trying to build these programs and create high quality programs. And we work with school systems, we work with community-based organizations, and we also work with public and affordable housing organizations, because those are also settings where a lot of young people, a lot of vulnerable young people are spending their time, and they need learning opportunities and supports there as well. So we work across all of those settings where young people spend their time and need and deserve those opportunities. And we really try to link that back to our advocacy and policy work and stay really grounded in the realities of what it takes to provide programming in a sustainable way for kids. So that's a snapshot of what we do.
Okay, so you're the founder.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So what made you get involved in the out of school time, after school issues?
Yeah, it was a little bit by chance. In the 90s, I had the great honor of working for President Bill Clinton as an appointee at the U.S. Department of Education. There was this new program, so I had to go visit some of the very first 21st century grantees in different parts of the Western US. And I became so inspired by the things I saw happening in these community learning centers and the services they were providing and the relationships that they were building with kids and with families in those neighborhoods. And I just fell in love with the work. And so when I left the Department of Ed in 2001, when the change in administration happened, I decided that, California needed an organization to really help build this in a more robust way beyond just what the federal funding could support. So So that's how I got started doing this.
Oh man. So before the appointment to the big time Department of Education, what were you doing? Like, how did that come about?
I was a young campaign hack. I worked on campaigns for progressive candidates around the country and, in DC. And I went to DC right after college in search of a career in public service and political activism. And in 1992, I got inspired by then candidate Bill Clinton, and I quit the job I had at the time and went on the road. And I was an advance person in his campaign, which meant I had to fly to different cities like every 3 or 4 days with a team of people to set up big rallies and things like that, which was a great job for someone in their early 20s with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And after he won, I had the chance to go work in the administration. And that was when I went to the Department of Ed.
Cool. Wow. Exciting times. All right. So you mentioned that you had an opportunity to meet and visit and work with what we call the godfather of after school, Dr. Terry Peterson. How was that?
That's right. Terry was an amazing person to work with. He was the senior advisor to the Secretary of Education when I worked at the Department of Ed. And, I was a very low level appointee at the department. And Terry was obviously very senior and important inside the department, but he was someone who always made time to mentor young people inside the department and make sure that we had a lot of learning opportunities when we worked there. And he was just an incredible leader and who was incredibly inclusive in the way that he worked. And I learned so much from him over those years. And it's been so cool to get to keep working with him, over all these years, since he really also developed a passion for the out of school time space. And so, we're super lucky that he decided to dedicate so much energy to the out of school time work after leaving the Department of Ed.
Yeah, cool. So, a couple of friends of mine, we're all jealous of California and all the dollars that you guys get from the state and all that good stuff. So 21st Century Funds came first.
Yes.
And then state funds came later.
Yep, that's right.
And was the California After School Network, was that already a thing or not?
That became a thing. I believe it first started in the late 90s. It had multiple iterations before it became the really strong network that it is now. But, it sort of followed on the original state investment in after school programs here in California, which happened in around 1997. We were, I think, the very first state to invest significant dollars into after school programs, which started with a $20 million investment, which seems like a lot even for back then, although, we're a very, very big state with 6 million school children here. And then, with advocacy over time grew and grew and grew to the $550 million through a state proposition in 2002, and now has grown to over $1 billion with the most recent investments, which is really extraordinary, and a commitment by our governor to actually take after school and summer funding to scale by 2025, which is, and make it universal access for all kids, which I never thought I'd see the day that would happen after all these years in this work. It's quite an extraordinary moment here.
So what role did you play from 20 million all the way to 1 billion?
Yeah, well, we were the first statewide advocacy group, advocating for resources for after school in California. And we have numerous organizations now that have been engaged in this work and doing it for a long time. But, we were kind of an early pioneer in that front. But, I will say that the very first investment in California was due to the incredible advocacy of 3 individual programs in California: LA's Best down in Los Angeles, San Diego 6 to 6, and Sacramento Start, in 3 very different parts of the state. They were early innovators in, running school community partnership after school programs. And they had the savvy to build relationships with state legislators over time who really got to know that work. And the 3 legislators who represented those districts where those programs were located came together in partnership and created the very first after-school funding program in California through legislation. So it was really their work on the ground that made it happen in the beginning. And then we and others kind of picked up the ball to try to create more statewide voice and more voice in the capital moving forward to sustain that investment and try to grow that investment over time. But, I like to tell that story because it really goes to show that, the work that folks are doing on the ground and the way they're communicating the power of their work and the relationships that they're building with their own policymakers makes a huge difference. Us advocacy groups who spend time in the Capitol and, our work is important, but it's nothing without the folks on the ground doing the hard work and building those relationships themselves.
Wow. So you mentioned LA's Best and those others, 2 others. Would you consider those big organizations or that really had some influence and some connection and some power? What would you recommend for the small grassroots organization to get involved in this work, especially policy change?
The size of the organization isn't the most important thing. I think that the most important thing is for all youth serving organizations to make advocacy just a part of what they do, a part of their job. And, that means finding ways to make sure that local stakeholders understand what they do and that they're communicating and building relationships on a consistent basis, and doing things like every single year, hosting site visits and inviting the mayor or city council people or a state representative, making sure those folks are on your mailing list, hosting coffees and events so they can come in, and giving them a chance to talk to kids and families about the work that they do and why it's important. And that investment in the local relationship building with local decision makers pays off in so many different ways. But it's not one-off work. It has to be consistent and it has to happen over time. And then it really does pay off.
Okay. Wow. So we need to be in it for the long haul.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It took me 20 years to see what I'm seeing now, and who knows what's next. But yeah, we got to stay in it for the long haul.
Yes. I've been serving here for 17 years. And so we're just making some progress. But now I want to figure out how to get more involved on the policy level, because as you know, most of what we do is policy driven. And so we're trying to figure out how to get some funding from our state, and any ideas on how to make that happen. Of course, building relationships and all that good stuff. We were even thinking about a public-private partnership where we bring a couple $1 million to the table, and then the state brings a couple $1 million to the table just to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of different ways to approach it that I think are so contextual to a state. But one of the things I wanted to say is that I actually think successful advocacy and policy work can be a real sweet spot for the youth development sector, because our specialty is building relationships. And that is what good advocacy really is so much built on, is building relationships. And it's not just with the policymakers that you're trying to influence, but, one of the things that's really helped us over the years here in California, and I think this applies everywhere, is that we've also really tried to build relationships and understanding across other advocacy sectors. So, for example, it can't just be the after-school people advocating for after-school resources. We've really needed our education equity groups. We've really needed our K-12 advocacy groups, the folks who represent the school administrators and the teachers and, other elements of the education sector. We've really tried to reach across a variety of sectors and interests to educate them about why after school matters so much to the kids that they serve and where after school fits in, so that they will advocate alongside us and so that they will include after school in the asks that they're making to the legislature from year to year. And we've really had to get good at that, because we're not the most powerful interest at the table ever. And we probably never will be. We don't have big money to spend on campaigns. We don't have the kinds of resources and influence that a lot of other advocacy sectors do. And so we've had to find ways to get after school infused into their agendas. And that has really paid off for us, and something we've spent a lot of time doing. And so, I think we have to think about the relationship building and the advocacy, not in a linear way, but in a really broad way, around all of the interests that need to understand the importance of our programs and why they require investment. And then you can get to some of the more tactical and strategy stuff around, do we want to do this through a piece of legislation, or is this a budget campaign, or is there a state ballot measure that needs to be spearheaded on this? There's a variety of approaches, but I think, getting the cross-sector alliances are absolutely key to getting this done.
Mm-hmm. Yes, one of the things I learned from the White Riley Peterson Fellowship was the importance of coalition building, because it's one thing for Edward Franklin and Voice of Hope to speak, but it's another thing for Edward Franklin and 50 or 60 other organizations to speak all throughout the state.
Right.
And so, but as you mentioned, we are good at building relationships. It's just getting everybody on the same page. But we have a nice little text post, as you may be familiar.
Yeah.
And we have about 6-7 intermediaries throughout the state. And hopefully, prayerfully, over time, we can all continue to get together and, come up with some legislative priorities and really move the needle in this regard. So maybe 20 years from now, I'll be calling you and I'll be saying, hey, guess what? Guess what we just did?
I think you're going to do it sooner than that.
Well, I hope so. Can you speak a little bit about the relationships between how you facilitate relationships between schools and community-based organizations? Because I just had a meeting today with the school district sharing how I feel is that you are you familiar with Horton Hears a Who, that movie?
Yes. Yeah.
I feel like the out of school time community, we're just over here. We are here. We are here. We are here. But now people are listening differently because of the global pandemic and what it's doing to our kids educationally. And so now they're looking at us a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that they'll want to partner with us a little bit more formally. But seems like you've been working on that for a while for school districts and CBOs. Hey, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've tried to tackle this from a couple of different angles because it's a real challenge and always has been. And I think that, because so many of the public resources flow through the school system, they have disproportionate control of how to spend those dollars. And we often find the CBOs like knocking on the door saying, hello, we're here, we're experts at this work. And that's been a challenge for a really long time. One way we've tried to tackle it is in policy, with our policy and advocacy work in the state capital over the years. trying to get policies and guidance passed that at a minimum encourages partnerships at the local level in implementing public dollars and ideally requires it. With the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program, partnerships are required for those grants. In our state program, partnerships are also required, although the language is a little bit different. With all of this new funding we've got in California, we worked very hard with our champions in the legislature to get language in the budget bill that went, through the governor and the legislature to reference the importance of community partnerships, as a research-based quality component of effective after-school and summer programs. And so that's one way we try to do it, is to basically mandate it and or encourage it if we can't get it mandated in the law or in guidance around the law that's coming from the state education agency, which really does make a very, very big difference. But it doesn't make the total difference if it's not required. At the local level, there still has to be collaboration and respect to make those partnerships work. So, we've tried to do that through a range of strategies at the local level. As an intermediary, part of what we see as our job in the work we do in communities is to bring those entities together, and we serve as sort of a neutral facilitator to help people understand what each is bringing to the table. And I'm oversimplifying in how I'm saying that, and we've sometimes had to bring incentives to the table to make sure that our school systems are coming in with an open mind. So, for example, part of what we raise money for from foundations is to convene school and community-based stakeholders together. And we will provide them, sometimes with stipends, or we'll help them with things like applying for after-school grants if they don't have the resources to do it, as a way to get them to the table, and then facilitate that dialogue. We've sometimes done it through professional learning communities with schools and school districts and their peers, where we'll find a school or a district that's partnering really, really well, and we showcase that as a best practice. And we employ the peer-to-peer pressure strategy, where we say, look at this awesome school principal or this awesome school superintendent who's doing a great job of partnering with their community-based organizations. And then we bring their peers to the table and say, here's how they did that. And don't you want to be that cool also? We will sometimes employ strategies around using the media and communication strategies to push our school leaders to do more around partnering. So we will help them get op-eds placed in a local newspaper, or we'll give them an award and we'll make sure there's a media story about it so they get recognition for the partnerships that they're developing, because our school leaders really need and like that public recognition. They've got school boards to answer to, et cetera. So there's a range of things that we try to do to encourage and incentivize the dialogue and the collaboration at the local level that we can kind of uniquely do as an intermediary. It's still not easy. I would say we have a long way to go in this. And from my perspective, we ought to be actually mandating this in the law consistently at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. We ought to be mandating that schools are working with, high quality, community grounded, community-based organizations to implement these programs, because there's so much we know about the value and the impact of that. It's not going to be possible in all places, but I do think that's the direction we need to move. And I also think we should make sure in our advocacy, we're directing some of those public dollars directly to community-based organizations. There's no reason all of these dollars have to go through schools. We tried to make that happen here in California. We were not successful, but we're not going to stop trying.
Wow, this is good. This is some good stuff. I wanted to do the very same thing. And actually, that was my policy project for the fellowship, was to try to incentivize districts to formally partner with community-based organizations, specifically around family engagement. Because most of our Title I schools, you already know, have a family engagement component.
Yeah.
And they're always looking for help to do that. And we have a unique and different relationship with families. So together we can really impact the school and the student. And so, but Mr. COVID messed up all my plans. And, we are every other year. So maybe in 2023, I'll get an opportunity to bring that back up to some of our legislators to see if we'll make any progress that way.
That's a great strategy. And I think, it points out that you have to find the right hook that is going to be the thing that the school system finds valuable, that they lack the capacity to do, that you can help them with. Like, what can you do to make their lives easier? What can you do to help them achieve their goals? I think family engagement is a great one. Social emotional learning is one. There's a whole range of these things that we know our programs can be real assets around. And I think it's a matter of picking the one that you do really, really well. And you can show some data around, you can tell stories around and make it really compelling. So I think that's a great strategy.
Well, thank you. Two more questions. One, what do you think the role of media, because you mentioned that, getting some media attention for the educators and all that is helpful. What do you think, should we have a media campaign to educate the public, to get the public all riled up, to communicate to the legislator, to make some moves in this area? Because the average person may not know the value and the beauty and all the benefits of after school programming. And we have to share with them. But what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, educating the public about our programs and getting them on board, advocating, whether that's making phone calls, sending texts, writing letters, all those things, is great and important. And it's really, really labor intensive and resource intensive. And, we've really had to think hard about how to use those strategies over the years with different things we've tried to accomplish, because especially in a big state, it's really, really, really tough to organize at scale. I think in individual communities, if you're advocating, with a school board or a city council, that can be an easier thing to do, where you develop relationships with the local media. You can get a reporter to come out and take some pictures and do a story on your program. You can organize rallies at City Hall. You can get parents to show up at school board meetings. I think there's a range of things that are doable at the local level that become much more difficult at the state level without a whole lot of resources. We've tried to get a little more creative around this over the years with some of the new technologies out there that campaigns use, like texting, for example. When we were doing one of our budget campaigns a couple of years ago, we raised a little money and invested in the texting technology, where you can blast out via social media, a number that people can text, and it sends an auto message to their legislator based on their zip code with a message like, vote yes on AB blah, 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 to support after school programs. And that was a way for us to get many, many more people contacting their representatives on something that we cared a lot about. But that it took a little bit of an investment, in organizing to do that. I think parents are a big untapped universe of partner advocates for our field. And it's, again, not easy to organize, but, that's a place, going back to the earlier point about developing coalitions, we've tried to get better about building relationships with other nonprofits that specialize in parent organizing, because that's not our area of expertise. So, we've tried to talk to some of the parent organizing groups to, figure out, how can we learn from you? Might you take on after school as one of your causes to get more parents engaged, because they're a big, big, big voting block, and so we're tried to be creative about and And the media is a great asset to us, but again, not an easy or necessarily inexpensive thing to do well, trying to get earned media stories and things like that. But there's so much we can be doing now through other free platforms like social media, et cetera, that we've tried to build capacity around over the years. And again, not easy. There's a lot of noise out there. It's really hard to find ways to stand out and get attention.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Wow, this has been rich, man. I've enjoyed every second of it, and it went so fast.
I know.
So, Ms. Peck, thank you so much for your time. I hope to have you as a guest, maybe sometime next year. Hear all about all the wonderful things that you've been doing out there in the Bay Area. Maybe I even get the chance to visit the Bay Area. What's that? San Francisco and Oakland, and yes, I would love to dip my toe in the water in the Pacific.
This is a beautiful part of the world.
Yes, I believe it. So one day I got to get out there. But thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate you being on the Out of School Time podcast. Now, if someone wanted to reach you or know more about the Partnership for Children and Youth, how would they do that?
I can be reached at jennifer@partnerforchildren.org, and the 4 is spelled out, FOR. And we have a website at partnerforchildren.org, and people are welcome to be in touch with us anytime.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Out of School Time podcast. Please visit us at www.voiceofhope.org. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can email us at info@voiceofhope.org or call us at area code 214-631-7027. Please also give us a rating and review on Apple Podcast. Thank you, and join us again, where there's always time for Out of School Time.